Okay, this is the second video in our Jefferson Flats video series here on this project, and I'm going to talk about analyzing this development topo surface to figure out where we want to put our catch basins. That is the ultimate goal of this phase 1 assignment, and so I want to find that development topo layer. I've got my layer properties button toggled on here, and I'm going to start by unlocking that surface layer so I can go to the surface properties and select a different contour style. I want to see more contours in this drawing, and you should have a 1/2 foot contour interval, and if I select that and apply and OK, notice I get it should be 5 times as many contours on my screen. And now I can really start looking at what's going on with the elevations across this drawing. And maybe you want to turn off a few of the other layers so the drawing is not quite so cluttered. Maybe I can get rid of these existing break lines, for example. So existing break lines, I'm going to freeze that layer just to turn those lines off. And this is curb and gutter lines. I'm going to leave those on for now because that might influence our decision as to where we put catch basins. And then I'm just looking to see if there are any other layers I can turn off right away. Maybe I want to turn off this this hatch layer, and that happens to be on the sidewalk layer. So I'm going to turn off this sidewalk paving. And maybe I even want to turn off these red lines. This is the right-of-way layer, so I'm going to turn off the right-of-way, freeze that. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm going to do the parking stripes as well. I'll turn those off. So now we kind of have a blank site, and we can start to figure out what we want to do with the water. So first, I'm going to just click on the development topo layer, and actually bring this layer properties back. I'm going to lock that layer that the surface is on so I can't accidentally make any changes to it. But if I select that surface, my ribbon changes and I get a bunch of analysis tools here. So I like this water drop tool, and when you click on the water drop tool, it does give you a few options here, including a path layer. So what layer do I want these lines to show up on? If I leave it on layer 0, they're going to show up as white lines, and I think actually I want to see a different color. So I'm going to click on that 0 cell here, and that gives me an ellipses button. I'll click on that, and I can pick an existing layer, or I can click on this new button and create a new layer, which is what I want to do. So layer name, I'm going to put an underscore in front of that to throw it to the top of my list in the layer properties, and I'll call it water drop. And then I'm going to change the color to something that's going to show up a little better. Maybe I'll choose a red color. You can choose any color you want. I'll leave the rest of this alone. And then when I click OK and OK, I should see that water drop layer show up here. So now when I click OK, I can start dropping water on my surface, and right now my O snaps are turned on. You see that my cursor wants to jump around a little bit. I'm going to turn my O snaps off with F3, and then I'll really just start clicking around in the drawing to see where does the water want to flow to. And pretty obviously water wants to flow downhill. I don't have any of these contours labeled, so you'll have to figure out what is what's your high point, what are your low points, or you can go through and label some of your contours if you like. You could also just hover your cursor and it will show you the elevation of the development topo and some of the stationing for nearby alignments. But anywhere I hover my cursor, see I get that development topo Z. So here's 893 5.23 feet. If I move my cursor again, I'll get a different elevation. And generally speaking, this site is very flat. So we're going to have to be a little creative maybe with some of our storm design here. But it looks to me, at least in this quadrant or this little corner of our drawing, the water is generally flowing from the north to the south, and then kind of over to the west here we've got a little low spot. And I'm going to want to identify that as a potential area for a catch basin. I'm going to just create a circle and say this is a low spot here, and we're going to have to do something about the water in that area. And so when we created this new layer, part of the reason that we did that for the water drops is so that I can select one water drop, right click, and select similar. It's going to pick all of those water drops, and I can delete them. So that's going to be a good way to kind of keep your drawing clean, is to be able to delete those water drop lines after you don't need them anymore. I'm going to go back into the water drop tool, make sure I'm still on that water drop layer, and continue my analysis. I'm going to click a whole bunch here, and I want to show you what happens as I'm clicking. Notice these lines are kind of going in opposite directions, and if I make those lines really dense, eventually we can start to identify actually a natural break line right here where the water is going to flow in opposite directions. And that may be handy later when we're having to do our watershed analysis. But I could create a polyline. Here I'm on layer 0, so it's going to be white, but basically that line right there is a ridge line or a break line where water is going to flow in opposite directions on either side of that line, or they're going to flow in different directions on either side of that line. And it should sort of line up with these contours. Notice this contour has sort of a chevron shape to it. Here that line started at the corner of a contour line. So we'll use that technique a little bit later on to start identifying watersheds. But it's also going to help you with this water drop tool, again, to identify somewhere we might want to catch basin. So right here we might want to catch basin, and also in this corner of the curb and gutter. Notice none of this water flowed up and over the curb and gutter. It's going to take a lot of clicking, a lot of water drops to figure out where we want to have catch basins, because on a 39-acre site, it's likely we are going to have a whole lot of catch basins. The more detailed your analysis is, the more catch basins you will probably realize that you need on this site. So my advice again, create a separate layer for these water drops so you can select similar and delete them, and just be thorough with your analysis. Now you can ignore anything that happens inside these building footprints. We will assume these buildings have flat roofs with some sort of some internal storm drain management on these buildings. They're going to have roof drains that are going to tie into a separate system, and we'll ignore that for now. Right now, just focus on the surfaces outside the buildings, but inside this 39-acre project area. I'm not sure how many catch basins you will need or catchment areas. We will figure that out as we go along. But especially focus on areas where we're going to be putting in roadway or parking lot, sidewalk areas. You know, all of the water should be draining away from a building to some catchment point. So right here, obviously, we're going to need another water treatment. And as far as these residential lots, I'll select the surface and do some more water drops here, but all of the water should be handled appropriately on these lots. And we will just assume that if the water is flowing off of our project site on these residential lots, that's okay. In real life, that might not be okay, but we will assume for the time being that this is just an extension of a previously engineered development that was expecting that. So again, anything that's flowing off of our site we can ignore, but all of these front lots here, or the front side of these lots, should be draining to a pretty clear area. So I will leave you to analyze that surface to the best of your ability, and we will talk about watersheds and catchment areas in our next video.